Hello and welcome. My name's George and my channel is all about helping you get the most out of Logic Pro so that you can record and produce your best music in your home studio. Today we're going to look at compression. We're going to talk about what a compressor does and when you might use it, as well as look at the stock Logic Pro compressor plugin, which is actually 7 different compressors built into one plugin. So let's dive in. So first, let's talk about what a compressor does. So first, a compressor is generally used to help limit the dynamic range of a performance on your track. So with singers, for example, you might have them sing certain words quieter or louder than others. And when you listen back to that performance, you want it to sound as smooth and as uniform as possible. So that's where a compressor can help. It can basically act as an automatic volume fader, which brings down the volume when words get too loud, and in turn, it'll make the quieter words sound louder. Many compressors will also have their own tonal characteristics, which will help color your sound a little bit. And lastly, compressors can also give your tracks more punch by helping emphasize transients. So let's see how this all works in our session. So I'm going to start by putting a compressor on my lead vocal track right here. So I can do this one of two ways. I can either go down here to my channel strip and click and go to Dynamics and Compressor. And you'll see here that that brings up the compressor. But if I close this and if I get rid of it, there's a quick shortcut to get to the compressor if I just go up here in this little bar here, which is our gain reduction meter. So if I single click in here, then it'll bring up our compressor. So let's talk about some of these knobs and what they do and how they affect the compressor. So one of the most important knobs on a compressor is the threshold, and this tells the compressor when to kick in. So if we go and switch over to the graph display, this will make it a little bit more obvious. To start, I'm going to put our threshold to 0 and our ratio all the way down to 1. And I'm going to press play on our track. You'll be able to see where the current level of our vocal sits on our graph.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away. It kills me inside, don't wanna hurt you this way. When you're here by my side, I feel you slipping away. Tell you a lie, I just need you to stay.
So you can see on the graph that the louder words were kind of in this region, and we were getting some down here as well. So the compressor is going to help level those out so that they're all a little bit more uniform. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up the ratio. And just for demonstrations purposes, I'm going to bring this all the way up here. Well, let's go all the way up to 30. And you'll notice as I bring the threshold down, you can see here this kind of line here. And so this is where the threshold is. So the vocal that I played earlier, you could see the signal go along this graph. And now when it hits this area, which is our threshold, that's when the compressor kicks in. So that's setting the threshold. So this is telling the compressor when to kick in. And now the ratio, on the other hand, which I cranked all the way to 30 to make it easier to see on the graph, this is how much compression is applied once the threshold is reached. So once my vocal hits the threshold, how steep is this curve going to be? So if I bring this down here, you'll see that it's now quite a lot less drastic. And currently I'm set to a 3-to-1 ratio. So for a ratio of 3-to-1, for every 3 dB that crosses this threshold, it's going to bring that gain down by 2. So the compressor is only allowing 1 dB of signal to cross the threshold for every 3 dB. And if I increase this number to 5, then for every 5 dB that goes above the threshold, only 1 will cross. And you'll see, as I mentioned before, this gets steeper and steeper. So if I play back our vocals now, you'll be able to see the amount of gain that's being reduced by the compressor.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away. It kills me inside, don't wanna hurt you this way. When you're here.
And you can hear as I bring down the threshold, the volume of the vocal comes down with it. And in the graph here, you can see the amount of gain reduction that's happening as well. Now for vocals, I generally like a 3-to-1 ratio, which is pretty smooth and not a whole lot of compression. And for the threshold, I usually set this so that I'm applying about 3 to 5 decibels of gain reduction. So I'm going to go back to our meter actually. And here on the meter, you can see the amount of gain reduction that's being applied. So with this knob at 0, we're not going to see this meter move at all. But as I move this closer to -10 and -20, you're going to see more gain reduction be applied and the vocal will get slightly quieter.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away. It kills me inside, don't wanna hurt you this way. When you're here by my side, I feel you slipping away. Tell you a lie, I just need you to stay.
So there we're kind of in the -3 to -5 range. And you'll notice too that in the louder words, it's applying more compression. So it's the meter's going all the way to -5. In the quieter words, we're staying, -2, -3. So in doing that, it's bringing the louder words down, but the quieter words are less affected. So it's making the quieter words sound louder and making the louder words sound closer in volume to the quieter words. So now that we've got our threshold and ratio dialed in, we can look at makeup here. So right now makeup is set to 0.5 dB. And the makeup is just used to make up some of the gain that we lost from the compressor. So since we're compressing -3 to -5 dB, we can add back that gain if we choose to do so using the makeup gain. You'll also notice there's an auto gain here, which is currently off. And so if I hit 0 or -12, Logic is automatically going to add some gain in there. So I'll start in the off mode and then I'll apply 0 and -12 and you'll see how that affects the volume.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away. It kills me inside, don't wanna hurt you this way. When you're here by my.
So at 0 dB, it got quite a bit louder. And actually, you could see that we were peaking a little bit there. So I'm just going to manually add in anything that was lost. In this case, the vocal's pretty loud to begin with, so I don't feel the need to add in all that much gain. I could add maybe 1 or 2 decibels if I wanted to, or you could just leave it at 0. And now moving along to some of the other knobs we have here. The next one is the knee. To demonstrate this, I'm going to go back to the graph. It'll be a little bit easier to show here. And once again, just for sake of demonstration, I'm going to crank my ratio all the way up here. And so you see this point here where the threshold is, that's what's referred to the knee. And if I put this all the way to 0, you'll see that it's a much sharper point now than it was. So that's what's referred to a hard knee. And if I bring this up to 1, you'll see how that rounds off a little bit more. So the knee just affects how the compressor reacts as the signal gets close to the threshold. So if you want the compressor to kick in right away, then you would want a hard knee. If you want it to be a little bit more gradual and softer, you can apply a soft knee. And now I'm going to put my ratio back to 3-to-1. And moving along again, now we have our attack and our release. So the attack refers to once our vocals cross the threshold, how long does it take for the compressor to reduce the max amount of gain, which is set by the ratio. So currently we're at 23 milliseconds. We can increase this all the way to 200 or begin it at 0. So at 0, you'll get full compression right away. And the releases, once the signal goes below the threshold, how quickly will the compressor return back down to 0? In other words, how quickly will it reset itself? And here you'll notice we also have this auto button. Now with having this enabled, the release time will change based on the material you're playing, but the release time you set will still affect the compressor. In other words, it's not 100% automatic. And now if we jump back to the beginning here, you'll notice this input gain. So this just controls the signal volume coming in. So before the compressor ever affects the track, this will be the signal that's coming in. So let's say if you recorded your vocals really quietly, you can simply boost the gain before it hits the compressor by increasing the input gain. Or the opposite, if you're a little bit too loud, you can turn this down here. Most of the time, you can just keep this at 0. And over to the right, we actually have a limiter built into this compressor. So a limiter acts similar to a compressor, but with a really high ratio. So you might hear the term brick wall limiters. And that term comes from the threshold basically being a brick wall. The signal is not going to be able to get past the threshold like it is with a compressor with a lower ratio. Once again, if I turn this all the way up to 30, you'll see this will be closer to a limiter. But in reality, a limiter is just going to be a straight line across, and it's not going to let any peaks go through it. So if we wanted to limit the volume of our vocals, we could do that. That's not something I generally do, but you can turn that on and then set the threshold of the limiter. I can demonstrate that. I'll just play the first few bars of the track, and we'll see where our vocals are ending up level-wise.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away.
Okay, so the highest we got was minus 6.7. So let's say if I reduce this, set my limiter to minus 8, turn that on, you'll see that it won't go above minus 8 this time.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away.
So that's how the limiter functions. I'm going to turn this off and put my threshold back to 0. And then we also have some distortion here. So if we do want to clip the audio in here, this just changes the characteristic of the distortion that happens. So to demonstrate that, I can crank the makeup gain, which is going to distort when we go over 0. And if I want to bring down the output gain so that it's below 0, I can do that with this output gain knob here. And then you can hear the different types of distortion that are going to happen. So I'll start with soft.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away. It kills me inside, don't wanna hurt you this way. When you're here by my side, I feel you slipping away. Tell you a lie, I just need you to stay.
So if you're after a gritty distortion type sound, you can play around with that. I'm going to reset my output gain to 0 and my makeup gain back down to, let's say, 2. So that covers all our controls for our compressor, and you'll find similar controls on almost all compressors. So threshold, ratio, and makeup, those are things you'll see on almost all compressors. Attack and release on most of them, although there are compressors such as the LA two-way that do not have these. And knee is another one that you might not see on all compressors. So far we've been using this vintage VCA compressor. If you look at the top here, you'll notice we actually have 7 different compressor models that we can try and choose from. So we first have this platinum digital compressor. Now this is going to be the cleanest sounding compressor out of all of these. And next we have 3 VCA style compressors. VCA stands for voltage controlled amplifier. These compressors are often described as slower and warm. They're often used for things like bass and lower frequency instruments. The Studio VCA is modeled off a Focusrite Red compressor. The classic VCA is modeled off of a DBX compressor. And the vintage VCA is modeled off an SSL compressor. The next style of compressor we have is the FET compressor. So these are known for being punchy and fast compressors. They're often used on drums, vocals, and guitars, and other instruments where you want a fast attack. The Studio FET is based off an 11-76 compressors, and so is the Vintage FET. And lastly, we have the Vintage Opto compressor. Now this compressor is based off an LA2A, although the original LA2A doesn't have attack or release times available to it. So it's a little bit different in that sense. But these compressors are known for being clean and clear and are typically used on vocals and guitars as well. But with all that said, there's really no rules when it comes to which compressor you use on which instrument. So now I'll play back our vocals again, and we can scroll through the different compressors and see how that affects the sound. And I will just mention that your settings do not change based on the different compressor you use. So I'll start with the Platinum Digital, and then we'll work our way down.
When I look in your eyes, I see you slipping away. It kills me inside, don't wanna hurt you this way. When you're here by my side, I feel you slipping away. Tell you a lie, I just need you to stay. You're slipping away, slipping away, slipping away.
So there you can hear the difference of how each compressor reacts to the material. It is subtle, but each one just gives you a bit of a different flavor. So I hope that helps clear up what a compressor actually does and help demystify some of the different controls that you have available to you in your compressor plugin, and also just show the great compressor plugin that you have built in right into Logic Pro. If you're looking to continue to improve your workflow in Logic Pro, make sure to download my free Logic Pro X hotkey cheat sheet by following the link in the description below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.